disability. Whether you're an elderly citizen or a citizen with a disability who is not employed, it's important to recognize that those individuals oftentimes are limited in their access to health care because of their limitations in their employability. So the College of Pharmacy is deeply concerned and deeply interested in this entire process. It's incorporated within our educational processes. It's incorporated within our research enterprise. And it's incorporated in very demonstrable ways, such as having the Roads to Independence program housed within our College of Pharmacy. So those are some of the reasons why our College of Pharmacy is so actively involved in this process, and that's the reason why we feel so strongly about convening this session here today, and thank all of you for the privilege of engaging in this dialogue and bringing to the fore so many critical issues that are serving as impediments to our citizens with disabilities.
Thank you, Dean. Well, it kind of jumpstarts our discussion. What are the real issues here? What are the issues to allowing workers or potential workers with disabilities the ability to bring purpose into their lives? Would anyone like to start? Yes. This is Pat Curtis, and she's from Illinois Medicaid.
Yes. One of the issues that I have seen, and I have been working in this field for many years. I'm not going to tell you how many. Yesterday was my 60th birthday, so I just want you to know that this is the first day on the job of being officially in Illinois a senior citizen, since the Department on Aging uses age 60. Anyway, let me get on with my comments. I think one of the major issues, and an individual upstairs previous to this meeting articulated it extraordinarily well, and I'm going to try to do it justice. We have been hearing for years the term full inclusion. And typically what is meant by that, at least in many of the fields and participant enterprises that I've been involved in, talks about where individuals live, moving them out of the institutions, and in Illinois we're still doing that, we aren't finished. But not much attention has been paid to the fact that unless and until we use the word full inclusion to mean employment, we are not really talking full inclusion. For individuals in this country, unless you are born with, I guess, a Paris Hilton checkbook and savings accounts or whatever, we all don't have a choice to work. We have to work. It is a huge part of our lives. Whether it's good or bad, it's how we define who we are. The first thing we ask people is, what do you do? We have excluded people with disabilities from that conversation because we continue to equate having a disability with the ability to work. You can't be both in the same time and same place. You are either disabled or you are employed, or you can kind of be employed, but you can't make too much money. So I think one of the biggest issues is how we look at disability, how we define it, and how we frame the entire discussion. Until we can get there, we will always be doing piecemeal efforts to accommodate people into some kind of employment, but don't make too much money. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. I'd like to turn the discussion over to Martha Royalty, who is going to kind of put some legs around Pat's commentary with regard to what we are looking at with regard to the laws surrounding inclusion. So, Martha?
Thanks, Wendy, and thanks, Pat. As I indicated before, I am the director of the Center for Workers with Disabilities and the National Association of State Medicaid Directors. And partly that's due to the fact that I love to work, but partly it's a fact that I didn't want to give up the director's job of the Center for Workers with Disabilities because it's a personal passion that I have for the issue. I am blessed to, in addition to having the 2 full-time jobs, have 5 wonderful children. And one of the children that I have is a 24-year-old with significant disabilities. He was adopted by us at birth, and when he came to us, we understood that he was a special bunchkin. So we have a little Mexican-Irish man in our family. We call him a Mexicano. But he is autistic with a heart condition. He has seizures, and he was born with total hearing loss on the one side. We never, though, treated Danny any differently than any of the other of our children. And we always assumed that Danny would work. We never had any other expectation for him other than that he would graduate from high school, go to college, and go to work. We were fortunate enough to live in one of the wealthiest counties in the United States with an outstanding school district, and they never questioned our desires for our son and pursued a regular course load and had a full inclusion through all of high school. Unfortunately, when Danny graduated from school is where the reality started to hit us, because Danny's on a lot of medications, and we began to become concerned about what would happen when he lost the family's insurance and the ability to take the insurance. It also became apparent that he wouldn't be able to go to college directly from school, which was a concern, again, to the ability to have insurance. So I started down the road of applying for Social Security for my son, primarily so that he could get the Medicaid that would go along with the Social Security. And it took 5 tries, even with 4, as my kids say, ginormous binders of documentation from the neurologists, the cardiologists, the psychiatrists, and a full team of doctors that had said from age 3 that he was severely disabled. But I will never forget the Social Security worker that called on a Saturday, Mrs. Brown, who on the 5th try called to say that he actually was disabled and that he would be receiving Social Security. That didn't stop us, though, from wanting to get Danny a job. I was not engaged in this position at that time and didn't realize how complicated it would be. So he did start out by going to work, and then we realized, or his social worker, I guess, had told us that he might lose his Social Security if he earned too much. And I thought, that's a little odd, but I don't care about them. The cash benefits never bothered us. That's not why we were doing it. We were doing it for the Medicaid. Around that time is when I was started working for the American Public Human Services in this job at the Center for Workers with Disabilities. And I learned about the wonderful program, the 1619 A and B. So I called up the Social Security office and I said, I want to enroll Danny in those programs. And they said, we don't have any such thing. And I said, yes, I know you do. And they said, no, we don't. So I ended up having to print it off the website, drive over to Social Security, and hand them the form that I got off their website. Danny, subsequent to that, also received a ticket in the mail, and we said, well, that's a nice thing. We can experiment and see how the ticket program actually works. So we went online, and the vast majority of programs in our areas, the employment networks, other than the VOC rehab unit, were housed in Florida, which would make it a little inconvenient since we live in Virginia. So that was a little odd. And then he finally decided that there was one, and he took a bus, a circuitous route, finally gets over to the place, and they said, no, we don't serve anybody with autism. We only serve individuals with mental health issues. So we finally get them to say that autism could qualify, and they agreed to see him, and then Maximus denied that he was a ticket holder. So clearly there's some issues, because if I'm the director of the Center for Workers with Disabilities and my son can't even get into the program through these wonderful programs that have been established in law, we have some serious issues here. I am very pleased to say, though, that My son is fully employed, off all benefits. He is in a 401k that's better than mine. He's been successfully employed for 2.5 years now, and he took his first vacation with pay, as he keeps pointing out to me, last year. So that was very exciting. But he actually did it all by himself with Monster.com. It works. So, but I did want to, I tell that story in the beginning because I think that it's important that I want to have people understand that I do understand how difficult these issues are. We have some wonderful federal programs that have been put in place, but I think that the majority of individuals, because they're not utilized a lot, when they go to the Social Security office, I think that there are times when people just don't know. It's not that they're trying to be mean or trying to hold people back. I think that people don't know. It's similar to the situation in the Medicaid offices. These are programs that are so very, so infrequently used a lot of the times that I think that you almost have to go in prepared, that you know what you're asking for. Elena asked me to go through a brief chronology of some of the history of what programs have been enacted so that we can all begin from the same page of understanding. And as you see, we put together a time...
In your packet, you should have the PowerPoint presentation.
Right. It's this blue PowerPoint. And I work with John and Elena a lot, and they'll tell you that I don't follow PowerPoints very well. Never have, never will. But I will tell you that I'm very excited to announce that I did actually turn my cell phone off. The last 4 times I've testified at national panels, the cell phone goes off in the middle of it, which is quite embarrassing, especially when it's one of the kids asking if they can have a Pringle or something. As you see on the page 2, there's a long history of federal programs that were put in place to encourage individuals with disabilities to work. And the biggest one I think that we have is that the longest running one is the 1619A and B, which put in special provisions so that people could continue to work and earn money without losing their Medicaid services, which, as we know, is critical to people wanting to continue to work. And I looked it up this morning, and I think in Rhode Island you're up to about $33,000 you can earn up to with the 16. Yeah. So that's a significant amount of income that you can have and continue to receive your health benefits. In addition to that, the Americans with Disabilities Act, of course, encouraged businesses, states, and federal government to also look at individuals with disabilities in an entirely different way and require them to not discriminate against individuals just on the basis of their disability. It also put in place a number of requirements to making accommodations so that people with disabilities could have reasonable accommodations that would allow them to work. There were also, in 1997, you can see there, the Balanced Budget Act put in place the first Medicaid buy-in provisions. And some of the states have enacted their Medicaid buy-in programs through the BBA. You do. In Rhode Island, they do. There you go. And the Ticket to Work and Work Incentives Improvement Act was put in place in 1999. Right? Yeah. And that's another extension in a different way that the states can put their Medicaid buy-in programs in place. Regrettably, even with all of these wonderful programs in place, though, of the 54 million Americans with disabilities, there's about 15.5 million that are working age, and only about 35% of those individuals are actually employed. So even though we've had a lot of laws put in place, we just don't have the same amount of individuals that are, or we don't have the desired outcomes that we would hope for given the number of programs that are in place. On the Ticket to Work